This is NC Spin, an unrehearsed discussion on issues of interest to North Carolinians. Now, here is your moderator, Tom Campbell.
Welcome. You've heard and read the spin the media and the politicians have put on the issues of the day. To get the correct spin on what's going on in North Carolina, let's introduce you to our panel of experts. They include political analyst and lobbyist Peg O'Connell, John Hood, chairman of the John Locke Foundation and syndicated columnist, Chris Fitzsimon from NC Policy Watch, and political consultant Doug Raymond from the eastern part of the state, not down east anymore, the eastern part of the state. Well, welcome to this special edition of NC Spin. We've got some good topics of interest to talk to you about tonight, so let's get started. The first one concerns Tom Ross's firing at UNC Chapel Hill. The announcement caught us by surprise as the Board of Governors fired Tom Ross as the president of the 17-campus system. The 64-year-old Ross had been president since 2011 and wanted to remain for a few years longer. The big question on everybody's mind was why and why now? Board of Governors Chairman John Finnebress said the dismissal wasn't because of his age, it wasn't because of performance problems, and it wasn't political. Doug Finnebress heaped a lot of praise on Ross and said the board had total confidence in his leadership until a new president was named. Under the circumstances then, why be fired and why now?
Well, I think all those statements he made were accurate, except that it wasn't political. It absolutely was political. I think everybody knows it, and there's nothing wrong with it being political. I think what has happened, a lot of people expected this in 2015. They didn't expect it in January of 2015. So that's where the timing was a little unusual. But if you look at the way this story has played out in the media, a lot of people are looking at this as if Mr. Ross was a lifelong academic or something. He has a political background. A lot of the people that have been appointed to this position has a political background. And when the legislature puts in a new board and they are supposed to reflect their political leanings, they're going to want somebody to run the show that has their political leanings. So it's part of the process, and there's nothing real wrong. And my disappointment was when it came out and said that it wasn't political, when it absolutely was.
Well, Chris, I mean, I think we've, on this show, have been sort of critical of the fact that the UNC Board of Governors wasn't doing what they were chartered to do, namely running the university system of North Carolina. They certainly did it here.
Yeah, and I disagree with Doug a little bit. There's several things about this. First of all, whether or not he should have been fired. I'm troubled that he was fired. I think he was a good president. I agree with the Republican chair of the board who said he was a wonderful president, a man of integrity, leadership. He praised him more than anybody I've ever heard who was praised as they were being dismissed. But secondly, the way it was handled. Not only was the press conference, we were told it wasn't political, it wasn't his age, it was none of these things that we've talked about. But only a handful of Board of Governors knew this was happening as late as Thursday afternoon, and I've talked to a couple of them. They were completely blindsided. Some of them supported Tom Ross, some of them didn't, but a lot of them were very upset that this was a decision that was sprung on them late Thursday afternoon. They barely had any time to dissect, to understand the decision or to consider the severance package they gave Ross. So there's a lot of division on that board, and a lot of people are unhappy about it.
Well, that was part of his contract, as I understand it. But John, Ross, as so many other high-ranking people in government and academia and so forth, serves at the pleasure. The interesting part to me about all of this is that the media, while questioning whether this was a political exercise or not, then turned around and made it a political diatribe so far as the criticism of the UNC Board of Governors. Didn't you think so?
I thought the entire way the story played out was preposterous, utterly preposterous. There was no surprise. People had talked about it for months that he was going to be replaced, but then they pretended it was a surprise. Then they suggested that there was something, as if he was a federal judge serving for life and someone has somehow intruded on his right to stay as long as he wants to. This is ridiculous. If you have a school board, and we've seen this many times, school boards, county commissions, they will change from one party to the other or one political faction to the other. And yeah, it would be gauche to come in and immediately dump somebody who's been hired by the previous board. You don't do that. You let them serve out the remainder of their contract, their term of office, whatever it is, and then you bring somebody else on. I actually would disagree with Doug a little bit about the use of the term political. If the argument is this is political because Tom Ross is a Democrat and we don't like Democrats, that's not the story. If Erskine Bowles had been there, he had more similar views about the university system to the current board, I'm not sure the same thing would have played out. If what it really was about policy. And elected officials choose the Board of Governors, who then carry out the policies accordingly. And I just think that Tom Ross, as good a man as he is, just has different priorities and they need their own person.
Peg, the big question everybody's asking right now is who's going to replace Tom Ross. There's a lot of speculation. One name keeps coming up, and that name is?
Well, I don't know at your
Art
house,
Pope.
but at our hope, it would be Art Pope. But, you know, I think, Mr. Pope is a very nice man, honestly, but he's such a polarizing figure that I don't think the University Board of Governors is going to go that way. But I did notice, I watched that news conference again this morning. I've never seen anything like that. That was the worst handled situation. I've never seen anybody fire somebody so badly in my entire life. And it made Tom Ross look more gentlemanly and class act in comparison to the board chair, who was just frenetic.
And I think that's a good point. That's why, you know, you can complain about the media all you want to. What's the media supposed to do when you have a Republican elected Board of Governors chair who sits there and looks reporters, every one of them, in the eye and says it wasn't his age, he's the best, one of the best presidents we've ever had, he's doing a great job, it wasn't politics, on and on and on. I mean, the media is reporting what he's saying doesn't make any sense.
Almost sounded like a eulogy to a certain extent.
What are they supposed to do?
He should have been prepared to explain better that this is a normal course of operation that most governments do most of the time.
And that would have been perfectly fine.
So does the next president need to come from academia?
No, because he didn't really come from academia. He was the president at Davidson, but before that, he was the chief of staff. He was the chief of staff for a Democrat United States congressman. He was an appointed judge, an attorney. He had a very short span in academia. It doesn't mean he didn't do a great job, but that was one of the things I read in several newspapers is, oh, the Republicans may go outside of academia. He was really outside of academia.
And the
when you look
previous
at
president was too.
Yeah, so there's nothing unusual about that.
But you know, the board chair said something at the very end of that news conference, which I think gives us a clue as to what's going to happen. He said that former board president Hannah Gage talked about how cumbersome the last search process was, and we need to reform that. So I think they've got a short list. There's probably about 4 different candidates that the factions are looking at, and that's going to be.
And I believe that one of them is from academia, is from North Carolina, and is a current chancellor of one of our major universities.
Interesting. Well, remember that beginning next week, we're going to be adding 2 new stations to the NC Spin statewide network. Starting Sunday, February 1st, NC Spin will begin airing on WCCB Charlotte CW18 on Sunday mornings at 6:30. And on that same day, we'll begin airing at WXLV ABC 45 at 7:30 in the Greensboro Winston-Salem market. 2 great new stations, so make a note. Be sure to tell your friends. Beginning February 1st, NC Spin on WCCB Charlotte at 6:30, WXLV ABC 45 at 7:30. And of course, you can always watch us on YouTube and see additional video content on our website, ncspin.com. Balanced debate for the old North State. When we come back, we're going to talk about a new Medicaid board.
NC Spin will return after these messages.
Phones are getting smarter, cars more efficient, TVs bigger and more stunning. Imagine the same innovation from agriculture. Meet the Plant Sciences Initiative at NC State, a proposed state-of-the-art research complex where world-class researchers will tackle agriculture's toughest challenges, like feeding the world's rapidly growing population while preserving natural resources for future generations. Join Farm Bureau and NC State in moving North Carolina to the forefront of ag research in the world. Visit keepaggrowing.org.
Every year, North Carolina patients undergo 635,000 same-day surgeries. 72% of these surgeries are performed in our highest-cost hospital facilities, adding as much as $2,000 to every procedure. The state's outdated Certificate of Need law prevents competition from lower-cost, higher-quality same-day surgery centers, inflating healthcare costs and limiting patient choice. Tell state lawmakers it's time to lower healthcare costs now. It's time to make a simple fix to an outdated law, increasing patient choice and lowering healthcare costs now. You can help. Visit reformconnow.com and tell lawmakers it's time for a simple fix to an outdated law. It's time to lower healthcare costs now.
How will North Carolina compete in a future where everything is accelerated? Join state leaders February 9th and 10th at the Raleigh Convention Center for the 30th Annual Emerging Issues Forum. Explore how innovators are thriving and how North Carolina can keep pace. Register now at emergingissues.org.
CCA-NC is an organization that really tries to help everybody enjoy their moments fishing. They try to help create awareness. They also work on trying to protect our resources so that it'll be there for our children as well.
I think another consistent theme that we all have is we want to leave the resource in better shape than we found it.
You know, CCA do so many different things, be it a habitat project, restoring oysters, maybe working for good conservation and good management, going fishing and sharing a passion for a healthy resource.
There's plenty of fish for everybody. There's fish for the commercial guys, there's fish for recreational guys, if it's managed in an effective and scientific way.
We have that world record style fishery here, but we've got to make science-based management the future of our fisheries management policies, and then we'll be moving forward, and our legislature needs to know that.
Become a member today at ccanc.org/join.
We now return to NC Spin.
As the new legislative session begins in earnest next week, lawmakers let us look under the tent, perhaps, just a little bit to see what might happen with Medicaid. In keeping with a push by the state Senate, we learned they will introduce legislation to form a Medicaid oversight board to run the $13 billion program in our state. The 7-member paid board would be appointed by the legislature and the governor and would hire the state Medicaid director. The DHHS secretary would be a non-voting member. It wouldn't have authority to set budgets, but the board would have authority to adjust spending if costs were exceeding the amounts budgeted. Peg, it's no secret that the legislature, especially the senators, have little respect for or confidence in DHHS Secretary Aldona Vaush and in the department itself. Is that what's fueling this proposal? What chance does it have for passage, do you think?
Well, I think what's fueling this proposal is the number of legislators who want budget predictability for Medicaid. And that's what also fueled the push by the Senate in the past session to push everything into private managed care. So I think that's where this is coming from. I think perhaps what you're seeing is more frustration with the House and those House members who are looking for a North Carolina solution to Medicaid. So I don't think there's any particular frustration with Secretary Vaush on this, other than just the general feelings that they have toward her. I think as far as its passing, this proposal was floated before, and it failed last year. So the Senate's pushed it, and the House has said no.
Yeah, well, we thought it was dead. I mean, the talk was...
See, it came out of program evaluation as opposed to Medicaid reform. So this is an idea whose head keeps popping up. The board that they put in place over the State Employees Health Plan took the legislature out of the day-to-day management of the health plan, and it helped. But the way this proposal is shaped right now, it's not going to get them better
John, tell us how this
could
possibly work. Okay, so they're going to take Medicaid out of DHHS, and yet it's going to have to interface with DHHS at almost every step of the way. And now we got this 7-member politically appointed board that's supposedly making, I mean, how's this going to work?
Well, it sounds cumbersome, admittedly. It interestingly is not without precedent. There are some systems that look like that in other states where you have independent entities that administer Medicaid rather than the Department of Health or HHS or whatever it's called. I think one of the challenges here is the long-standing dispute now between the executive branch and the legislature about the appropriate separation and balance of powers. In this case, the legislative appointees, I think, would be a majority under the proposal that I've seen, and that's where the governor has been drawing a line. He's not arguing that the legislature shouldn't have appointive powers over administrative agencies. That's been going on for decades. It's in the Constitution. It would be silly to argue that that's unconstitutional. The argument, though, is that if it's not specifically authorized in the Constitution, you can't set up an executive agency, essentially, that doesn't answer to the executive branch mostly, that instead has a majority of appointees from the legislative branch. That's the legal dispute that I think is going to continue.
You were getting ready to...
Well, I was going to say this is another test, not just in the makeup of this board and other boards. It's a big battle between the administration and the General Assembly.
Yes.
Medicaid Director Robin Cummings spoke to the Program Evaluation Committee and was very passionate about why this is a bad idea, why taking this out of Medicaid, creating another board. It also strikes me that the Republicans who love small government keep expanding government with commissions. We have a coal ash commission. We want an all-new Medicaid commission with more political appointees. I thought the point was to shrink government, have fewer boards and commissions, and yet we're creating more of them all the time.
And you're adding a layer of expense when you're paying these 7 members
over $100,000.
a ton of money.
Same salary as our Council of State members.
Sure.
Yeah, you hang around the legislature a whole lot. You get a flavor for how things are going. Is this going to pass?
Well, I was surprised in asking some people. There was a little bit more positive reaction than I thought, but this is what I do know. Barring something else popping up, this is going to be the hot button issue of this legislative session. So much so, I had several legislators independently telling me, we could have a very short, long session if this gets settled. If it doesn't, that this one issue could drag out this long session even longer. That's how contentious it is.
I mean, everywhere we turn around, there's another, this is the hot button issue of this legislation.
But it seems to be the consensus that this is it.
All right, well, so how's all this going to affect Medicaid reform? Is it going to be dead if they just create this new board, or are they still going to try to go through?
Well, that is Medicaid reform
Well,
in some ways. I mean, I don't think it's the good way to reform Medicaid, but that's one of the ways they could reform it, by piling all this stuff on these 7 people, letting them manage to a bottom line of whatever amount of money they give them, and tell them, you know, if you have to cut benefits, you do it.
Don't call us.
Secretary,
That's it.
Secretary Vosch this past week put out another, in a mailing to the constituents and reporters and everybody, reaffirmed her call for accountable care organizations, which is what the administration wants to do. There's still a lot of sentiment in the Senate to do more of a private managed care. I don't think this would preclude that debate either. I think it's part of it, and it's all going to be wrapped up in how they do Medicaid, and I do think it's one of the 2 or 3 things that could keep them here all summer.
Yep.
Interesting. So it could be another long, hot summer.
Absolutely.
All right. After these messages, we're going to talk about food and fiber.
NC Spin will return after these messages.
The cost of everything has gone up dramatically over the last 75 years. With one exception, keeping electricity affordable. That's the power of your co-op membership. Learn more at togetherwesave.com.
North Carolina's Touchstone Energy Cooperatives, looking out for you.
I sit in my exam rooms day after day with patients all day long. We get to know our patients. Sometimes I can't sleep at night if I don't think I've done the very best thing for my patient. And I think over time a patient learns that that's what you're doing for them, and they feel a responsibility to try to do the best they can, to follow their diet, to take their medicines, to exercise. It should be up to us to make the decision for our patients, and not some bureaucrat, hired gun, 2,000 or 3,000 miles away in a little cubicle somewhere. I think the job is ours. We're the ones who know the patients. We know the medicine. We know what's best for them, and we think it should be our decision.
North Carolina's family physicians support Medicaid reform that keeps healthcare decisions right where they belong, between the patient and their trusted family physician.
OurNCHealthcare.com.
Does your North Carolina business or organization have a story to tell? I'm Richard Campbell, and at Carolina Broadcasting and Publishing, we help tell stories that connect you to the people who will respond. We take the time to understand our clients' needs and what makes them unique. We craft their stories through the efficient use of words, images, and videos that resonate with their desired audience. We also know that a good story is incomplete without a call to action. On video, on air, online, and in print, from concept to final production, no one can help tell your story more effectively or affordably than we can. For special introductory offers, visit carolinabroadcasting.com or call 919-832-1416. Again, that's carolinabroadcasting.com. Let us help tell your story today.
We now return to NC Spin.
As we tape this NC Spin program, we're pleased to have a live audience in attendance. The Agriculture Leadership Group, agriculture remains one of North Carolina's #1 economic contributors, some $78 billion annually to our economy. Fewer than half the state's 50,000 farms are run by full-time farmers, and the average age of the North Carolina farmer is 59 years old. John, technology and science are helping to produce more food on fewer acres, but even with the dramatically increased production techniques, we face a shortage of farmers going forward. What do you think we can do to encourage our young people to become farmers, and what's going to happen if we don't?
Well, it is true that there's an inevitability to the relationship between farming and the personnel going into it that you can't do much about, and is actually good news, the extent to which productivity creates more value per person that works in the field. But absolutely, there are young people who don't really know what farming is like today. I was a 4-H'er, as many people were, back in the day at least. You know a little bit more about it. People who have more direct experience with farming knows that it is definitely a lot about technology and innovation. You're figuring out how to compete in a global marketplace. It is still a thriving industry, as you mentioned. Farming and agribusiness is the future of North Carolina, just as it is the present and the past. So getting a clear indication to young people of what it really would be like to go into the field is a critical element of the solution.
Chris, part of this is the fact that as big as this is as a contributor to North Carolina, in fact, the late Jim Graham used to complain about this all the time. It doesn't get much media coverage. Why is that?
Well, because there's nobody cutting a ribbon opening a farm, and no politician is, you know, having a news conference
Don't give
saying,
them any
here's
ideas.
another farm. I mean, I think that's one of the things, and it's one of those things that's always there. And doing amazing things for the state. I think what's interesting, and I think this will continue, it's happening in a lot of states, it's happening in North Carolina, as the whole movement to eat more locally grown food, exactly, whether it's organic or not. There's more, the farmers market movement, the whole healthy eating that everybody's talking about. I think there's a great opportunity, especially in the areas where there's not a lot of industry, to go right from the farm to the table and to restaurants and other places. I think that's a growth sector.
We've done a lot in North Carolina insofar as biotechnology is concerned. We're one of the leading states in the nation, especially ag biotech. But we've got an antiquated plant sciences infrastructure, and the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences at State wants the legislature to give them funding to build a new building for research and development, as well as to incubate new businesses using that research with innovations. We talk about spending money for incentives to lure new companies coming in. Wouldn't it make sense that we would be willing to invest in homegrown businesses and research? Do you think we could get the legislature to go along with this, Doug and Peg?
Well, I mean, that would be a great incentive, but I think the biggest incentive is just the business model, the good old American capitalism. There is a lot of money to be made in farming if, number one, it's approached as a business, and not to step on anybody's toes, but not as a birthright, that you look and you see these are the crops that have high yields, that it's not as labor intensive as other ones. There is a lot of money. I've heard Steve Troxler say there's going to be a lot of farmers driving Maseratis in years to come, and I think he's exactly right. For those of you who can look at it as a business and approach it like any other business, and also that our schools don't penalize young people who have a vision for becoming a farmer and look at it as a secondary choice.
But can we sell this to the legislature, Peg?
Well, you know, I think we actually, my colleagues and I in public health have been working on issues just like that to find markets for locally grown produce and healthy food. And anything that smacks of incentives right now is not very pleasant to this legislature. So whether it's film or farm, I don't think so.
All right. Well, after these messages, we're going to ask the panel to tell us something we don't know.
NC Spin is brought to you in part by the North Carolina Farm Bureau. The Farm Bureau and Agriculture. We keep North Carolina growing.
Hi, I'm Linda Loveland. I want the best for my kids. Feeding them foods they like within my budget is a priority. But what do we really know about these foods? North Carolina farmers and food experts give you a website to find it all. FeedTheDialogueNC.com, a place where moms like you and me can learn more about the foods we eat and the farmers that feed us. Check it out. Add your input and help feed the dialogue. Let's talk food at FeedTheDialogueNC.com.
Nobody ever imagined a mammogram machine being subject to CON law. If I want to invest our business dollars into technology that I think is going to benefit my patients and customers. We should be able to do that. I think it's time to take a law that was intended to protect the citizens of North Carolina and now is harming them and change it. I'm Dr. Bruce Schroeder, and I support CON reform.
Visit reformconnow.com.
How will North Carolina compete in a future where everything is accelerated? Join state leaders February 9th and 10th at the Raleigh Convention Center for the 30th Annual Emerging Issues Forum. Explore how innovators are thriving and how North Carolina can keep pace. Register now at emergingissues.org.
I think family physicians are very conscious of cost. They want to order the right test at the right time for the right patient. If you have someone else who is interjected in that decision-making, who has profit as their bottom line motive, I think it changes the whole conversation. You lose trust. I think the trust is with the family physician who has the patient's best interest at heart. If the person making those recommendations and decisions about testing and procedures and going to see a particular specialist, if that is being made with profit in mind, there's no way a patient can have trust in that.
North Carolina's family physicians support Medicaid reform that keeps healthcare decisions right where they belong, between the patient and their trusted family physician. OurNCHealthcare.com.
Wherever I go, people tell me that one of their favorite parts of our show is when we ask the panel to tell us something we don't know. Doug Raymond, going to start with you.
There was a recent news story that kind of flew under the radar, I think, somewhat from the national level, where Attorney General Eric Holder said that they were going to no longer participate with local law enforcement in asset seizures. Now, there's a lot of debate on the civil liberties of that, but what isn't debatable, those are millions and millions of dollars that go to local law enforcement across this state. They're going to be singing the blues when that money isn't there, and they're going to be singing it to their county commissioners and the legislature. So look for the legislature in particular to maybe try to find a way to offset those.
Chris, tell us something we don't know.
We've talked on the show before about the proposal to grade every school A through F. In fact, we're going to talk about it again on an upcoming NC Spin. Interestingly, this past week, there's a bill moving through the Virginia legislature, which is controlled by Republicans. Virginia has that A to F system. There's a bill to completely repeal it, and it's being led by a Republican in the Virginia legislature who thinks it stigmatizes schools.
John, tell us something we don't know.
If you've been watching presidential elections in recent cycles, you see that in the early states like Iowa and New Hampshire, state legislators, mayors, county commissioners play a big role in endorsing candidates. Now that North Carolina is early in the calendar, we're going to see lots of presidential candidates asking for legislators to endorse them.
Peg, tell us something we don't know.
On February 26th, the American Academy of Family Physicians is bringing its Health is Primary Roadshow to Raleigh, North Carolina, beginning here, and they are going to feature physicians and hospitals from North Carolina as some of the best in the country in the innovative things that they're doing. And if you want to learn more, NCPAF.
Well, you've heard our spin on the issues of the day. To stay informed all during the week, give your feedback, read our column. Be sure to visit our website, ncspin.com, or catch NC Spin on Facebook. And we hope you'll join us next week when NC Spin will take on more issues of interest to the people of North Carolina. Until then, stay informed and watch out for the spin.
Join us next week and get the spin on issues facing our state.